Well, hello Zimbabwe, welcome to yet another edition of My Future. We've been doing this for the past couple of weeks, bringing in ministers of government to interact and speak directly to the youths of this country, all with a view to securing a brighter future, not just for the young people, but for all Zimbabweans in general. Tonight, we move on our discussion and we're focusing on information and communication technologies. The Honorable Minister of ICTs and Courier Services, Honorable Supa Mandiwanzira, is our guest in the studio tonight. And as usual, there is a panel of young Zimbabweans drawn from all over this country who will be speaking directly to him. Let me introduce, first of all, Miti from Mashonaland East, Ruarashe Nyashanu, she's from Harare, and Herbert Marembo, also from Harare. Honourable Minister, these are the youths you will be speaking to, and it's a pleasure to have you on the program.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here. I'm very proud to be before this wonderful audience, and I hope that we have a very great and fruitful discussion today.
Certainly, we look forward to it being fruitful, and it will begin shortly. We take a short break. Do stay with us. Well, thank you for staying with us. My Future continues now, and we are focusing on information and communication technologies. The Honourable Minister of ICTs and Postal and Courier Services is in the studio and in the hot seat, for lack of a better term, and he's speaking directly to the young people of Zimbabwe. All the way from Mashonaland East, Miti, you've come all that way, and we'll give you the privilege to go first and ask the Minister your question.
My question is, do we have ICT policy on education? And if we do have that policy, what is the policy? I believe this is a burning question in most of the young people out there.
It certainly is important that we have a national ICT policy, which will also encompass the issues related to education, because ICT is going to permeate through our lives forever and ever. It's such a huge industry that many people today don't actually understand how it is going to take over even their own lives. So it needs to be governed by an ICT policy. And yes, education is one of them, and we are going to make sure that it is addressed appropriately in that policy.
Honourable Minister, all well and good that a national ICT policy is on its way. It's not the first time that national policies in different sectors have been formulated but don't actually see the light of day.
I have not promised any policy that hasn't been implemented. I can assure you what we are putting together with the help of all Zimbabweans and those stakeholders concerned, and with cabinet approval, once we get it, is something that we are going to actually implement. In fact, it is something that is so desired at the moment, because the industry is moving on its own without a guiding policy. And that is what we are putting together. And what we would like to assure you is we are definitely going to implement. Have there been start and stops before? Yes, there have been, and for many reasons. But the most important thing that we must celebrate is something is being done about it, and everybody is being asked to participate, and we are going to make sure that we implement.
Well, my question, or basically suggestion, is updating information on websites, especially government websites, as well as university information, because being a young writer myself and in Upper Six, I have to do a lot of research. And most of the information pertaining to the country of Zimbabwe is not fully updated. And is the ministry doing anything to make sure that that information is way more frequently updated than we see today?
We are lacking as a government in terms of ensuring that the ministries have updated websites. They have, of course, not just updated, but also good-looking websites that attract people to want to log on to those sites, and providing quite useful information. We have, under the Ministry of ICT's Postal and Courier Services, a company that is called Zanet, which is responsible for access to internet for schools, for educational institutions, and also one of the things that they're working on is to ensure that even government departments, government ministries also have updated websites, or actually do have those websites. It's something that we are going to work on and encourage our colleagues in cabinet or our ministers, that you cannot be effective as a government ministry without providing a source or a platform for providing information for the generality of Zimbabweans or anybody outside our country who wants to know what it is that you are doing. We are working in the ministry on ensuring that we have the skills that we provide to the ministries. But you know, we are an ICT ministry. and I'm a minister of the ICTs. If we go to another ministry, there's a minister there. And sometimes it's very difficult to instruct another minister who's at my level to do some things. Because, then, we don't want to create somebody who's a minister who's a super minister better than the other. Save for the fact that just my name is Super. But it's a question of just encouraging each other to make sure that our ministries are following this. And I'm very glad that we are getting cooperation from all the ministers, and they're beginning to acknowledge and accept that we need to have sources of information that are updated. So we have to create a government portal, and these are functions that are not necessarily under the ICT ministry, but other ministries or departments. Our role is to go and advise, to say, we think you should do this, and because this is what is important.
Herbert, the only man in the front panel, please go ahead.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. It is apparent that in densely populated government high schools, they use a hot sitting system whereby students come in the morning and then they go home at 1 o'clock for the other students to come in the afternoon. The main reasons for this hot sitting system is that there are not enough resources for the schools to implement an effective system just like any other school that is like an even population. So the issue here is that, so instead of having that hot sitting system, can your ministry implement a system whereby these students can all come in the morning and then have a projector where everyone can see, instead of having textbooks that are not enough for other students, everyone can see the same information at the same time?
Unfortunately, we don't superintend over the education area in this country. We have a Ministry of Higher Education, we have a Ministry of Secondary and Primary School Education, and there are ministers who are responsible. But we have a responsibility as the ICT Ministry to provide the platforms and the solutions which can be adopted by these ministries for use in their ministries. And I think that what you are suggesting is one that is very possible. One suggestion that we have come up with, the shortage of textbooks, the stories of school children sharing one textbook, 20 sharing one textbook, or a class of 45 sharing only the teacher's textbook. We can deal with that problem overnight by ensuring that we use the ICTs. We have proposed, and we are working with our colleagues in the other education ministries to move the very important program that was initiated by our president, His Excellency President Mugabe, the schools computerization program. We wanted to step it up, resources permitting, by ensuring that it goes to one tablet per child program, where one child must get a tablet, and this tablet must be able to come preloaded with all the textbooks. So if a tablet costs you $150, including the license fees for the textbooks or content you put there, you then address this problem that you are no longer going to have kids in schools sharing one textbook, because everything comes on the tablet. And we know, and we have great respect for Zimbabwean parents, if there's anything that they are committed to, is to sending their children to school. And we think we can make life easier for Zimbabweans by ensuring that one tablet per child policy is adopted, and we find a mechanism of getting these manufactured locally, because then we are providing a market to the manufacturer of up to 12 million school children, university students, college students, high school students. We will provide a market of almost 12 million people who will have a tablet each. And we think that we should encourage investors to set up an assembly plant here, create jobs, because there is a market. And we also think it is possible to then ask parents to contribute towards the purchase of this one tablet. And if we say 150, we spread that over 2 years, parents can afford, while they pay their fees, to pay a small amount towards the acquisition of the tablet. But more importantly, with the advent of telecommunications technology around mobile telephony, now we have what we call 4G, or long-term evolution, which our government entity, and we're very proud of this fact, Net1 is implementing at a huge cost. What LTE will allow is that we will be able to send quite a huge amount of data via the signal of mobile phone. It means that we will also be able in schools to download data, quite big amounts of data, faster than before.
Very exciting developments, a very exciting future. We'll take a break and come back and look at more immediate or pressing needs that can be solved or need to be solved more quickly, which is the objective and purpose of this program. So My Future will be back shortly. Don't go away. Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. It is My Future and we're talking to the Minister of Information, Communication Technology, Postal and Courier Services. He's been speaking to the panel in the front, but let's open up the discussion now to all the other students that we have from all over Zimbabwe. Sir, I know you've got a question there. Please go ahead.
Kuna ma-school drop-outs ariko kunze uko asi kuenda kuzvikoro vana ava muri kuvabatsirawo sei kuti vawane access to technology.
Chokutanga ndechekuti tinoda mazano enyu kuti chii chatingaitira vana vakabuda muzvikoro vasina chokuita, vasina mabasa, vanodawo kuti vabate technology asi vasina pekuti vangaibatira kupi. Mukakwanisa kutipa mazano okuti toita sei tingazvitenda chaizvo. Ndingakunyeperai kuti no tine zvatiri kuita, asi isu chokutanga chatanganangana nacho ndichocho chokuti hatidi kuti kumaruva kwedu vasare kumashure panyaya yeteknology. Saka mutungamiri wenyika akatanga chirongwa chekuti chikoro chega chega muZimbabwe ngachiwe namakombiyuta. Mutungamiri wenyika akanotsvaga mari yake yokuti chikoro chega chega chitengerwe makombiyuta. Zvimwe hazvisati zvaane makombiyuta ari kushanda nekuti magetsi haasati asvika, asi takapiwa basa seMinistry of ICT, Postal and Courier Services kuti tichibatsira zvikoro izvi nekutsvaga vanotipawo tingati magenerator, vangatipawo kana kuti zvokushandisa zvakanangana nesolar energy kuti makombiyuta akwanise kushanda. Matimi software yatiri kushandisa ipo kana kuti zvichakatisarirei kumashure zvinongoitawo nemawanira atiri kuita. Zvimwe zvacho tinopiwa nehama neshamwari seministry isati yaane mari yakawanda iri kutsvaga kufunga kuti mari tingaiwana papi chaizvo chaizvo kuti tikwanise kuunza the very latest of technology. Asi tinongofunga kuti kana usati wambobata kombiyuta ukabata ya1980 watoona idea kuti kombiyuta yakaita sei. Totangira ipapo, panozouyawo zvakanaka towedzera, tobvisa. Hatifunga kuti zvataisa izvozvi tofunga kuti zvicharamba zviripo forever. Tichasvika pamukana patinoita ane mari yekuti taakuchibvisa old equipment toisawo new equipment. Tofunga kuti ipapo tinoita kukwanisa kuti tiite on the very latest.
Honorable Minister, mataura makombiyuta akapiwa nemutungamiri wenyika, mati mamboteerawo here panguva yamapinda mubazi ramuri kuti muone kuti iri kushandiswa nemazvo here? Are these communities getting the full utility out of these computers?
Chiri kutongotadzisa kuti va-access or to harness to the maximum inyaya yekuti pane pasina connectivity ye-internet, and we are working on that through Zanet. There is certainly use of computers. In fact, there is a desperate need for more. Because at each school, our policy now is we must have at least 45 computers. We must have a minimum of 40 to 45 computers to create one lab. But this is for a school, some of the schools which have up to 500 school children. They have to do a computer lesson and they have to pass through the same lab. We're saying it's a starting point. If we had the resources permitting, each class must have its own computer equipment. But it is not possible. There is a hunger for more. The computers are being used. Where they are not being used is really a question of energy, where there's no energy solution, and we have to look into solar energy or diesel energy. But unfortunately, once you put diesel energy, you are burdening the parents. They have to contribute towards the diesel.
Talking about resource and resource headache, I know that the next lady who's going to ask a question may have a possible solution for you. So, my sister, if you could please go ahead.
My question is it possible for a ministry to create a fund from which schools can withdraw to develop their ICT?
Thankfully, we already have this kind of fund in place. You see, for every call you make, 0.5% of the total bill goes to a fund called Universal Services Fund, USF. This fund is a standalone fund, but administered by the board of the Postal, Telecommunications and Regulatory Authority, which is POTRAS. The fund is meant for universal access. Now, universal access means if we have an area in Zimbabwe where there is no telecommunication service, for instance, or there's no post office, for instance. But let me use the telecommunication service as a good example, where there is no service because no company has decided to build a base station there and put transmitters so that people can have a phone signal. Simply because the population there is not economically or commercially viable for the operators. The fund must go and build that infrastructure in that area and allow the operators to come and put their equipment onto that infrastructure. So that is allowing universal access. Now, that fund must also provide for research into the world of ICTs. That fund must also provide for universal access in terms of previously marginalized groups or poor groups to access telecommunications, because we have a responsibility as a government that everybody must be at the same level. No one must be left alone or must be left behind in the development and this technology revolution. So that fund is there, and that money must go to assist the schools that don't have computers. It must go and assist young students who want to develop software applications, who have a passion for that, and it must go to provide them access to those kind of things. So we have some issues around the fund, but we are discussing them to ensure that it actually serves the community of Zimbabweans who don't have access.
How are children being protected from harmful sites on the internet, like pornographic sites or gambling sites?
I told you at the beginning that we have to come up with a policy. That's why a policy is so important, the national ICT policy, because it helps to put the framework of the industry, the do's and don'ts of the industry, and that's one area we are very, very seriously concerned with. I have young children. I have 2 daughters and 1 son. They're very young. You know, they have access to iPads or to computers. I want to have control over what they watch. I want to have control over what they surf on. And right now, we have no mechanism of doing it. And it's thoroughly important that we have a mechanism to control what can be accessed in this country, and particularly what's going into schools. Now, that is possible when you have what we call an internet exchange. We are very grateful that SADC, the SADC region, at the level of SADC, they've decided it is so important that every country within the region must have an internet exchange, so that all traffic is filtered through an internet exchange. That is the point at which we must be able to filter the dirty content. But we must also make sure that we then strengthen our laws as informed by the policy to make sure that those who are caught pushing such kind of offensive material are sentenced to jail, very heavy terms, so that it doesn't happen.
Earlier, I heard you talk about the e-tech expo that you said is going to take place sometime this year. So my question to you is, what is your ministry doing to make sure that all people get the information on these expos, especially on when and where they are going to take place, so that we all can participate in them?
I'm actually quite disappointed with ourselves because we didn't go aggressively in terms of publicizing this event. It's actually an annual event, and we didn't go aggressively. But obviously it was because of budgetary constraints. But I want to assure you that next year we will make as much noise as possible about this expo. Because previously, it is always including a careers expo for those school children who want to understand careers around the ICT sector. There is also a careers expo. Unfortunately, this year we replaced the careers expo with the ICT policy, because we think that the national ICT policy is long overdue and we need it now. So we then decided that it must be prioritized. But that doesn't mean that school children are not welcome. They also are an important stakeholder. So they need to be there also to contribute to the national ICT policy, their ideas, as we are having the contributions that are coming from this audience.
Very innovative and very exciting, but I suppose the key question that these young people will have is, given the situation we have in Zimbabwe, can we afford, do we have the resources to implement and make this an integral part of our lives as you have just described?
Well, I don't know why we as Zimbabweans think so backwardly about ourselves, because we are far ahead. You see, we are probably the only country in Africa which has more mobile phones than it has people. I'm sure you have heard that Econet has said that they have 80 million subscribers. Telecel has said it's got 4.5 million subscribers. Net1 has said it's got almost about the same, about 4.5 million subscribers. Cell phone penetration in Zimbabwe is more than 100%. It means our appetite for technology is so high. The most exciting thing about us is that we are well educated and that we are the most literate society in Africa. We are #1 in Africa as the most literate country, thanks to ZANU-PF and President Robert Mugabe and the policies of ZANU-PF over the years since the independence in 1980, which means we are able to adapt to technology much faster than anybody else. Everybody is using a smartphone in this country. Now, smartphone is enabling some of these applications I'm talking about. It's really about smartphone technology. We are already, as government, through Net1, implementing a $218 million project to upgrade our base stations to 4G, which means we will have LTE 4G technology in all our urban centers initially and rolling out to our rural areas, which means we will have faster access to internet. Now we can do the kind of things we're talking about. We can put Wi-Fi in a combi. So when you are in a combi, you're actually working. You are not just doing makua and using the Wi-Fi.
Honorable Minister, I must stop you there because we're almost out of time, and there's a question I need to ask because, you know, a lot of the focus, obviously, tonight, being young people, has been about gadgets, tech, IT, and things like that. But your ministry also touches on postal and courier services. The image that many people might have of our postal services is that is old-fashioned, that is not modernized. What role, or does the postal service still have a role to play going forward to serve young people such as these?
You know what? In Zimbabwe, the post offices are playing a very significant role. In fact, they are probably the largest bank in the country. They move, the post office, move over $300 million every month. Because we have a branch network of 226 post offices around the country. Everybody who is in any business wants to partner the post offices because we reach where people are. So you will find that EcoCash uses post office. You will find that Telecash uses post office. One Wallet uses post office. NASA uses post office. Pension funds, they use post office. People collect their pensions through the post office. So we are such a very critical player in the lives of Zimbabweans. But more importantly, we are also converting post offices into community information centers. That's where we are putting these computer labs and making sure that communities can actually come and access computers, access the internet at these centers. So the post office is quite still very relevant and very useful in this country. In fact, we want to build more where there are no post offices because we believe a post office is a center for development because that's where the people are going to access computers if they don't have computers. So they are very useful. The image you have, please discard it.
Honorable Minister, we must end it here only because we're out of time, but we thank you for coming through and being a fantastic guest, and I'm sure the audience also appreciated the interaction that they had. There are other issues we wanted to get into, which we hope to bring you back on, e-commerce, for instance, and so many other things. So this is an opportunity to have you back.
With ICTs, the future is orange. It is bright. I'll be happy to come again.
Fantastic. And that does it for this edition of My Future. We've just heard a very bright future ahead of us, and that is what we are hoping to create on this program. My name is Farai Mwakutuya. Do join me again next time for another edition of the program. Bye-bye.